my daughter's tap dance for just 3 minutes on stage. We met halfway between our hometowns and shared a weekend sightseeing in Chicago, going to the aquarium, the American Girl doll store, and going all the way up to the top of the Sears Tower, where I'd once worked as an attorney. It took us a long time to get there. I don't mean to get to Chicago. What I mean is that it took us a long while to reach that point in our relationship. You try with one event, you try again. For instance, a year after I met Val face-to-face, I introduced her to my father, and this happened to be the same day my father introduced me to the woman he was dating, and that was the same day Val introduced me to her children, her other children. And there was a lot of emotion going on that day. Maybe that's why the day before, instead of preparing for a holiday dinner, Dad took a circular saw to the dining room table. While my mom was alive, my folks used to have big dinner parties with 17 people around one table. It was really just a big piece of plywood that my dad set on top of a really good dining room table. But Mom wasn't around anymore, and Jackie, Dad's soon-to-be fiance, was. The table as it was just couldn't stay. So just a few hours before Dad had 13 people over for Thanksgiving, he pulled the tablecloth off the plywood table, flipped on a switch for the saw, and rendered into the table over which we'd broken bread as a family and with friends. So this is the image I had in my mind as I took Val's son and daughter around the house trying to give the tour without referring to my parents as my parents. Try doing that sometime, by the way. It's really hard. I knew what Val wanted me to call her, just Val. We established that on the first call, but I didn't know what her kids expected me to call her. I was so worried about calling Val Val in front of her kids, I wasn't prepared for what her daughter said when she picked up my sister's senior photo. I was just excited at the thought that she recognized who my sister was at a different age in this picture. What she wanted to know was this: so is this your other sister? I'd been so wrapped up in how my triangle was changing shape, I hadn't considered what it meant for Val's kids too. They didn't even know about that side of their mother until just a couple years before. She'd waited to tell them until the youngest was done with high school. She'd waited until they were an age where they might understand. Right away, they wanted to help her find me. They went along to the town's library to help her search through high school yearbooks with the information the detective had given her. But I wasn't in the school I was supposed to be. I'd been sent to a better one, and then I skipped a grade. So when they couldn't find me in the right school in the right year, her husband suggested they check the obituaries. And as I mentioned, my mother had just died a couple of months earlier. You know that part of the story. What you don't know yet is that Val's husband is not my birth father. He was a boy she met right after she had me. She was a grocery store clerk because she dropped out of college, and he was the one helping her bag groceries. They were married 3 years later, and she didn't tell him about me until they had a son together. And even then, she waited until that little boy was a couple years old. She needed to wait until it was safe. Throughout the years, though, her family has always welcomed me. I've been in my half-brother's wedding. I was at the reception for my half-sister when she eloped. What really brought Val and I together, though, was my writing. I figured if I could get anyone to read what I had started working on, it would be Val. And she did. She read all of my really awful first drafts of a novel. Nothing like having a project you both are really involved in and care about in order to bring you together with someone you want to know better. The story that I was working on got better and better, and when it was done, she sent it off for her sisters to read too. We held a book club at one of her sisters' houses. Remember how my dad had said, I'm not sharing holidays? Well, that book club event was actually during a holiday. We did all share together, Dad and Jackie and Val and her husband, Joe, and me and my girls. At the time, it had been 13 years since she first found me, and it turned out we had a really lovely weekend together. And yet, at the end of all, we still had secrets left to share. So my story is about what took so long to get those last secrets out and what those last secrets were. It's hard to believe that Val and I are over the worst of it. For some people, at least, it's really hard to believe. I was told by a leading writer adoption that I'm really not as healed as I think I am, which ironically sent me back worrying. It's been 17 years, though, now, and we're good. I've checked and double-checked with myself and with Val. and really we are good. What's meant a lot to me is that all sides of my family have been so supportive. And for instance, they've all come to my readings and events. Val hosted an open house for one of them in celebration of National Adoption Month, which happens to be this month in the US. And for that time, my aunt, my mom's brother's widow, who lived a couple of hours away, came along. And so my aunt got to meet most of Val's 8 sisters, and she chatted a long time with Val and her daughter, my other sister. And she got to talk with my friends from high school who were there too, to have these important people from my past be all together with the people who have become a part of my present meant so much. I can't tell you. I'm a writer, so I'm supposed to have words for this. It meant my worlds could come together, and it meant I didn't have to live apart anymore. Speaking of secrets, one I haven't told you about yet is about my biological father, David. Part of the reason I haven't talked about him yet is that he died in a motorcycle accident a few years before Val found me. So I never did get the chance to reconnect with him, but Val did reach out to his parents on my behalf. They knew about me because of something David had left them. When he moved out, he took everything out of his room. He stripped the sheets off the bed, he pulled the pictures off the wall, he emptied all the dresser drawers, except for a letter from Val about me. This he laid open in the top drawer as if he wanted to say, I have something to tell you, but I don't know how, so here you go. And that's how they knew about me. David had 4 other siblings, and none of them knew about me except a brother who'd once promised David he wouldn't tell anyone this secret, and just because David had died, that didn't change a thing for him. So the brother didn't know the parents knew didn't know the brother knew, but when Val called several years later, looking for their dead son, they knew they had found that letter writer. David's parents and I arranged to meet when they had a layover at a nearby airport. I was just barely pregnant at the time with my second child, and I shared with them an ultrasound that I got right after Val's first visit with me, but that's really not the kind of picture that an 85-year-old couple really is interested in. It's kind of weird for them. So I was glad for the chance to get to know them. They have since passed away before I finished writing this manuscript. The book created, to be honest, a little bit of a challenge with David's family. Val definitely wanted me to share this story with you all. I checked with her before I even started writing it. She wanted other biological mothers to know they were not alone. I got the okay from 2 of David's sisters, both of whom I've gotten to know quite well. One is a poet and playwright and who lives near me. And whenever we meet, which is about once or twice a year, we enjoy talking shop. And I had her read and give the okay on the memoir before I sent it out to anyone. I know another sister well, too. She's a professor of international law, and I received her okay on the manuscript, too. So there I have there's one sister who pursued the career I trained for and another pursuing the career I'm practicing, and neither one of them had an issue with the memoir. But the ones I hadn't yet met in person had some serious concerns about the manuscript. I have to say they're very smart people, they're very well-intentioned, they're also very private people. So to have someone write a memoir about their dead brother and the consequences of his actions, well, it's going to create some friction. It didn't help that one of them had written all the Christmas letters for the family over the years, and here I am, this stranger, trying to tell the family story. You can see the potential for conflict. Their concerns are quite commonplace in memoir writing, but it gets really complicated when the subject is adoption and the birth father's family wants to strike his name from the record. They were asking for the record to be closed again. I couldn't ask that of Val. So I ran the second edition without making any of the changes. And when I met them, when I was on book tour, it gave us a chance to meet. It gave them a chance to hear my story, to understand the importance of the message, that my goal was to let biological mothers know they're not alone, to let adoptive parents know that there's enough love to go around, and to give adoptees the freedom to be loyal first to themselves. The important thing is that they were willing to listen. They were willing to talk. That helps us understand what's important to others and what's important to ourselves. I've been able to get to know the rest of David's family better now. He was a sculptor, and they gave me a couple of his pieces, one a sweet little a sweet little vase that he made just a couple months after I was born, another sculpture of a woman, and maybe that's Val. And this week, one sister is visiting the other who lives near me, so I am missing them to be able to be with you here. Like any family, sometimes we don't talk about things for a while, and then we finally do. Like any family, we figure out what matters, and we move forward. For all my families, we're a family together, but I've got to be honest in that my biological family feels more like another set of in-laws than mother, daughter, sister, brother, aunts, uncles. I say in-laws in a really good way because I'm really lucky to have the ones that I have. It's hard, though, to establish a mother-child bond when you don't have that day-to-day challenge of growing up or growing old together. Well, now I have the chance to grow old together. Meredith Hall, who wrote Without a Map and who's been supportive of me on my projects, has said that as strong as her relationship is with her son now, and as badly as they both wish they'd never been separated, he still doesn't see her as much as a mother as, say, an aunt. I don't mean to be disheartening, because I am so glad for what I have with Val and with David's sisters. I'm able to answer to that part of myself. I'm glad to have my dad, whose relationship I cherish very much. It's just as important to maintain a strong relationship with my father so that we can all work together as a family as a whole. It's hard sometimes to visualize how that works. At the last International Conference for the Alliance of Study of Adoption and Culture, Kate Livingston, Ohio State doctoral candidate in women's gender and sexuality studies, talked about her struggle trying to maintain an open adoption for her son. She'd drawn a series of interlocking circles to represent her, her son, his adoptive family, showing the strength found in an arrangement of Olympic rings. This is how I see our relationship, she said. In response, the adoptive mom drew a big circle in the center of the page. This is how I see us, she said. She drew a circle in the middle. This is my son, she said. She drew another circle on the edge of the page. This is you. It's hard to be happy in a relationship when you have such differing views of how life should intersect. I've been really lucky to have Dad and my biological family so willing to let me decide how our lives should intersect. In return, I've tried to do the same for them. It's easier to do now that I know the story on all sides of my triad. Knowing all the sides doesn't mean you can, want to, or should let go of your story. There's a part of me that still misses my mom. Some might think I still have adoptee loyalty issues, and it might well be another kind of issue an adoptee has with respect to an adoptive parent. Maybe I've missed her so much because I never felt I truly had her, that I never could truly claim her as a part of me, but she is. And so, in part, this memoir is as much a story of reconnecting with Val as it is claiming my mom and grieving the loss of my mom, too. And I felt so strongly that I couldn't imagine her anymore. I couldn't envision her anymore. And when my cousin, who looks so much like my dad, again, it's this adoptee issue of who looks like who and how does that work, and he said, "You remind me so much of your mom." And it was in that moment then that I realized I could imagine her, not as a still picture of what she looked like, but in all she did and all she loved. I remembered her race walking back to our mobile home, chasing after the dog who had run away, saying, "Don't anyone mess with my dog or my kids." I remember her handing me a banker's lamp out of my dad's car for my swearing-in ceremony for the Illinois bar, and it was supposed to be for my Grandma Jo, but she was the one who knew I'd spend long hours under not much light in practicing law. And when I would read stories to my children then, I would remember her reading stories to me too. I could remember her in all these motions. I could remember her in life.